Hello, Internet. This is Chase RedShirtKing Wassenar, and welcome to the 2018 NA LCS Spring Preview Podcast. That's right. This is going to be the time where we break down all of the teams. Instead of doing the team-by-team series, which is a lot more work-intensive, I just got two of my favorite analyst friends to come on the show. We're going to look at each team individually and then provide our final rankings at the end and give you the definitive Rough Drafts official power rankings heading into the split. And I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? Everyone knows you do your predictions and everything goes exactly according to plan. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And let's meet those analysts on the roundtable today. First is James SuperbianMG. Pelkey, how you doing, man?
Howdy.
Oh my goodness. And then Matt,
I'm doing good.
MG, how you doing, man?
How?
That well, awesome. Good to hear. Well,
I'm doing well in my predictions. Or is right because TSM always gets first.
yeah. Well, spoiler alert, buddy. We're not at that part of the podcast. It's okay. You gave him a glimpse. Now we're going to take a step back, and before we get into these individual teams, I do want to take a moment to bring, kind of bring us back into the off season. Obviously, with franchising, there was a lot of shifting going around. We knew that there were going to be new teams formed out of the ether, putting all these things together. You had Steve buying all of the players for a good while there. Lots of memes and shenanigans. And so, Pelkey, when you were watching this, what was the offseason like to you? What kind of, where was your mind space at, and how do you ultimately feel about how things turned out?
So I wanted to see what the differences were going to be, because you had non-endemic orbs coming in. I wanted to see, all right, how are they building rosters? Is it different from how we've seen teams do it in the past? And then you saw, like with TSM, especially, like they had more money than they usually did. It's like CLG had money for the first time in their lives. And are they going to build their team differently, or are things going to evolve once the situation changes for almost every team in the league? So that was really what I was interested in seeing, was what sort of the mindsets change.
Yeah, and there definitely were differences that we're going to approach team by team as to how these things were done, especially. You look at Clutch Gaming and their Rockets pedigree. That's an org that's always had an interesting approach to things, and they've done quite a few posts on what that approach was like. But Matt, what about you? What was this offseason like for you?
So my first thing was, I was just wondering going in, I was like, all right, so some teams are going to get stuck with some pretty bad like barely LCS and potentially sub-LCS talent, maybe players who never quite made it, or players who've kind of aged out, because I expected a lot of orgs to play it relatively safe on that front with their main rosters, because the whole point was just trying to get into the LCS, into this franchising system. And I think some of these teams are just going to worry about actually building competitive rosters over the next year or two. They just wanted to get in and get a roster that they could field that wasn't going to be like too awful. Like, some of these rosters are have some players that maybe shouldn't be in the LCS anymore, but they're necessary in order to fill out these 10 teams and give the teams a level of comfort. Because I think something we don't see in esports that's very prevalent in traditional sports leagues is that traditional sports teams are very comfortable with mediocre to average, as long as it's consistently mediocre to average. Traditional sports teams don't like variation. So I think we end up with some rosters and some players that are going to create some interesting games this upcoming split.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what players ended up on main rosters versus the academy rosters, which is a whole other podcast for a whole other day, and something I definitely want to spend some time on, because I do think it's fascinating that guys like Levi and Keen and Moon, guys that, we thought for sure were going to be, big name players in some major region are now playing in this academy system. And what the movement up and down is going to be like is going to be very fascinating to track. But we're not here to break down academy teams. We're here to break down the 10 NA LCS teams. And we're going to just go down in alphabetical order, which means everyone knows the alphabet starts with numbers. So we're going to start with 100 Thieves. That's how it's listed on Gamepedia. That's how we're doing it. This is a very interesting squad. Obviously, the Cleveland Cavaliers owned organization, completely new. So all of the players had to come from somewhere else. The top lane, they've got Someday from Dignitas. Meteos is the jungler from Phoenix 1. Ryu joins him from that Phoenix 1 squad. Cody Sun, the man who flashed too much at the World Championship for Immortals. And, of course, Aframu, the support from CLG. And they're going to be led by Prawley, the 3-time EU LCS coach of the split, because he did no harm, according to Kelsey Moser. So when you look at this roster, Matt, what are you excited by? What do you think is going to be the most interesting part of this team to watch?
I mean, on paper, those side lanes can pretty much stand with any team in the league. That's pretty exciting. Aframu's proven he can play with multiple 80 carries and be good. I'm interested to see how Cody Sun does as far as like changing from Ali to Aframu. I think potentially to me, I think that's a trade up just because it's going to be a lot easier to communicate with the team. With Aframu, the only downside is you're now adding a Korean mid laner and a top laner, which is not something I'm necessarily excited about, but I definitely think on paper having some days your top laner and Aframu and Cody Sun as your bot lane creates two points of strength that you can go from.
What about you, Pelka?
Overrated is how I mostly am thinking about this roster.
It's excited first. What are you excited about?
I feel like there's a lot of traction for 100 Thieves being because they've got names that are attractive, but Someday is the only 100% legit. He's gonna work out unless if everything goes wrong, he's still Someday you're fine in top lane, but Meteos is questionable. Work ethic, dedication going on. His champion pool hasn't been particularly expansive in a while. Cody Sun, I think, is not that great and looked better because he had Ole. But Aframu was sort of on a downswing last year. And the roster, if everything works out great, they have the talent, so to speak. But I don't think it's going to work out for them. Probably does not strike me at he isn't someone who brings out the best in his roster necessarily. So I don't see that roster really coming together in the way that everyone hopes it will. That's where I'm at with 100 Thieves.
He could bring out some pretty sick mustache game in Afro, though.
It's fair.
They've got that on point. It's funny. I'm very excited for this team. I think definitely more so than you, James. I think that ultimately for me, I look at this is a team that is going to have those strong side lanes, and we're going to have Ryu being paired back up with Prawley, which is the best that he'd looked in the last few years was while he worked under him. There was a lot more roaming going on. That was his kind of mantra, being there for his side lanes. There's a clear identity with this team. You look at this roster and you know how they want to play every week. And I feel like having an identity that you can build around and play around and game plan around, I think that helps a lot. And certainly Aframu is smart enough to be able to handle the shot calling aspects of that. And Meteos, of course, has built up that experience over the years as well. James, I already know what you're nervous about, so I'm just going to go over to Matt. Burst my bubble here, man. Why is this team not going to live up to what I hope it's going to?
So I definitely think it's super questionable in the current state of where like League of Legends as a competitive scene is, to have your two weakest players be your jungle mid lane pairing. Like that just sounds like your bot lane, your top lane can be great, but like at this point, it's all about like the plays you're making across the map. And like Mios, like I had an interesting discussion with some people. Okay, so who's a better? I would ask people who's a better jungler, Mios or Mike Young. People say Mios. I'm just like, but he lost his job to Mike Young, so it's one of those things where it's just like Mios is being really overrated by the community right now, and I get it's a nostalgia thing. I think you're being a little looking through some nice rose-hued glasses there with Ryu. That suddenly just having Prowley back is going to bring him back to like his glory days. I agree with Pelka on the Afro move front. He definitely was having some issues last year. I feel like, I mean, he left CLG. I'm inclined to believe that maybe there might have been some internal stuff going on that we just don't know about. So like some days a rock, and maybe someday he'll get a good team. But well, what I'm looking at right now is I don't have too much hope for these guys. They scream overrated to me, like Reddit bait.
I mean, that's fair. We've got two guys who are down on them. I don't think that your criticisms are off base. Medios, I think, is a concern. I think he is there for stability and off the rift stuff more than he is for anything else, and that's not a great place to be in a meta in which we have so many more imported junglers and everything else come in. I'm more excited for Ryu than you guys seem to be. I do think that there's potential in him, and I don't think he was on a team last year that played to his strengths very well. So I do think there's some more potential there, and certainly I think that you can make some. It's a back and forth on whether you think that 100 Thieves is going to have a better infrastructure than what Dignitas maybe was giving someday last split, and some of the ups and downs that come there. So there are a lot of things that I think could break the right way, but you are absolutely correct that things will have to break the right way for this roster, and it's not something that we can just assume, because it's not all of these guys in the prime of their careers back at the version that we like to remember them at. But we're going to move on to the next roster, which is Cloud9. Cloud9 made two big moves this offseason. Licorice from E United, the young North American top laner that people have been talking about for a long time, finally makes his way into the league. And Sven Skaren from TSM as contracts moves on to a team we'll talk about later. Everyone else, Jensen, Sneaky, Smoothie, Reaper, they're exactly what you remember. The core of Cloud9 is clearly there. So, Pelka, I'll start with you this time. What are you excited about for this Cloud9 roster?
Licorice, mostly. He's shown a lot of promise in the challenger scene, and I'm interested to see where he stacks up now that he is in the big leagues, so to speak. I am not super high on this roster. Sneaky had a very down year, and Sven Skaren for contracts is just I don't get it. From what I understand, they were eyeing someone else and just sort of fell backwards into Sven Skaren, which to me is a major mismanagement, because why would you get rid of contracts so early if you don't have your other options like set in stone, contract already written? So, but the team has too much talent to like just fall flat on its face. But Jensen is a player that I respect his skill, but he isn't. He doesn't carry a team in the way that I necessarily put much faith in, like consistently being able to do it, especially with like a worse roster. So I see this as a rebuilding split for Cloud9 especially, but I'm excited to see where Licorice gets himself going.
Yeah, I mean, people forget Cloud9 has had rebuilding splits every now and then. We have seen splits in which, what was it? There was a summer split where they got 7th, which was just barely enough that they got in the gauntlet, and then had the reverse sweeps all the way into Worlds. It can happen. We can't just, I think we tend to pencil Cloud9 in for their top 2 or top 4 playoff spot at the very least, and that's something that We'll have to see. Where are you falling on that, Matt? How are you feeling about this team after all the moves that they've made?
Well, I mean, I'm a TSM fan, so I've seen the more Svenskeren that I'd really like to see. And I guess, heading into the offseason, it was all this excitement about the potential of all the players that might be coming to NA and how he might end up with some really good rosters. And the best Cloud9 could come up with was like a Svenskeren and like a quote unquote up and coming like player, I guess, in Licorice. And I just feel like maybe they could. I still like. There's some things like. There's like 7 teams I really wish X Smithy was on instead of the jungler that's there. But Liquid Money to Liquid Money. Liquid Money, did I get that right? Liquid Money.
Liquid Money.
When in doubt, Liquid Money.
So I guess to me, I'm just like, this just screams of another Cloud9 team that just doesn't quite have that little extra bit to get it over the hump. Like, I don't see how this roster is better than last year. I don't think it is. So I guess my other thing for me is the only like potential like saving grace potential is if Svenskeren somehow, if that narrative that's been crafted by Reddit fanboys the last 2 years that somehow is TSM messing up Svenskeren's playstyle was actually true, which even if it was, I mean, how do you get that back? But if he really can just suddenly go back to being that super aggressive, like, aggro jungler, then maybe he and Jensen would make an interesting pairing. But instead, I just see all those times Svenskeren goes into enemy jungle and dies, and Jensen's not the type of player that Bjergsen is to be able to kind of go in there and save his ass. Jensen doesn't leave lane like that. I don't know. Jensen's got to make some changes as a player to be able to like successfully back up Svenskeren when he does make those miscalculated plays.
And that's something that like I think we've seen with how Contracts was on that team. When Cloud9 was at their best, they were going out of their way to make sure Contracts was ahead. I think Svenskeren, at least from a playstyle perspective, is very similar. You give Svenskeren a lead, he is a significantly better Svenskeren than a Svenskeren that feels like he has to try things to catch back up and feels uncomfortable playing well behind. So I do think that is, from a systemic perspective, I think this Cloud9 team is going to play a lot like the Cloud9 team we saw last year, with Licorice kind of stepping up into the do whatever we need you to do role, and Svenskeren being put in the same role the Contracts is there. Even if at this point of their career, I would probably want Contracts over Svenskeren, but at least the system should keep going, and that is valuable in and of itself in a split in which a whole bunch of people are, with all these new players, new contracts, new combinations of things. Stability can reign in a split like this and certainly help out a little bit. I also, just because I want to be that academy guy, Wiggly's real good. I don't know that Wiggly's going to be ready by the end of the spring split by any means, but if Svenskeren is as bad as we fear, there's no relegation after the spring split. You reload for summer, and maybe Wiggly's ready by then. Maybe he's had enough time in the gaming house to kind of coach that up. So people who are terrified of Svenskeren, I think that light at the end of the tunnel should be there.
It's not like he's horrendous. It's just that if you have title aspirations, you should be doing better than Svenskeren.
That's fair. Right?
Like, there's some teams in the NA LCS where Svenskeren could be one of their top one or two players, which might say more about their rosters than Svenskeren. But
yeah, let's go on. Let's go on to another roster here. Clutch Gaming is our third team today. This is a team that's obviously owned by the Houston Rockets. Very interesting team to look at. A combination of names from all over the place. The majority of them are Envious players. Lyra, the jungler, Apollo, and Hakuo in the bot lane, all coming over from Envious. For the rest of the roster, though, you have Solo from Goldcoin United, which is an interesting choice, if nothing else. Guy who is kind of, maybe the third best top laner in Challenger last split, but they seem to have a lot of idea of how they want to use him. Fabiven, of course, from H2K, big playmaker there that they're going to be adding to the mid lane. And Coach David Lim, who you might remember as the one sane person in Breaking Point back in the 2016 Team Liquid documentary. He was coaching their academy team last split and is a guy who has been waiting for a head coaching spot for a while now. This is a guy that I think people are very excited to see finally take that next step. Matt, what are your thoughts on this team? We're clearly not excited, nervous. Just throw it all at me at once.
Yeah,
that seems to be flowing better.
That plan lasted like one team.
Just give it to me, man. Where are your thoughts on this Clutch Gaming roster?
So Clutch Falls, I feel like there's like 4 or 5 teams in the NA LCS this year that have like 2 players that are like, wow, this is a great core to build from, and then the other 3 I'm just like, okay, yeah, they could have done better than that. So in theory, Lyra and Fabiven is a great way to build, is a great starting point to build a team from, right? I talked to people who think Lyra is like one of the 2 or 3 best players in the West. That might be a jump, but many people are very high on Lyra, and I think a few people, in fact, I think Chase might one of them think he's the best jungler in North America right now. And Fabiven, obviously, while he had a bit of his, greatest EU or upcoming EU mid laner thing stolen by Perks, is a good mid laner. So Lyra and Fabiven make a great core. A lot of people like Hakuho. I guess my big issue is like Apollo. You know who Apollo is, right? He's kind of like the Alex Smith of AD carries. Right? He's never going to be awesome, and he's never going to be awful. He's just going to go out there and go pew, 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 kill a few people, and you'll probably wish you had a better quarterback. And then, I guess, it's just 2 great players. 2 players I'm just like, why are they here? And then Hakuho's in there. Honestly, I haven't seen enough of him play to really comment on that. This is a team that's definitely screaming, I'm like, fighting for the, like, 6th slot type of thing. Like, the roster is not strong enough to fight for, like, the Spring Split title.
How do you feel about that, James?
I disagree. I think definitely a playoff roster. Hakuho is a monster. He's so good, and he's going to be so much better. That, like, so Solo is the question. Solo is this a playoff roster or is this a championship roster? It's pretty much, can Solo do what Hakuho asks, which is, I think, mostly just don't die while we're doing other stuff, which Seraph couldn't do very well. So that's really the question. But like the jungle down, I think this is as good a roster as any in North America. It's a fantastic roster. Lyra, Fabiven, Hakuho is fantastic, and Apollo is... The Alex Smith analogy works, but I think also you're underselling Alex Smith in that he's...
Well, this season, maybe.
When you give him the tool... Like, he is not a player who rises above himself. But when you give him the tools, he can take advantage of them. When you let Apollo get through laning phase and just get to team fights, he'll team fight. He'll kill people. He'll do damage. And he won't die super fast. So, as, like, your 4th best player, he's great. He's awesome. I think he's going to end up, like, if you're comparing them to rosters which you think are going to be among the best in North America, I think having Apollo as your AD carry is just as good as having Mike Young as your jungler. So I'm really excited for the Clutch Gaming roster. I think they're going to be super competitive, and I can't wait to see what Lyra and Fabiven do, especially.
Yeah, I tend to lean more with Pelkey here a bit. I like this Clutch Gaming roster a lot. I wish I liked it a little bit more than I do. I have concerns about Solo. I think that ultimately in a league that has brought so much imported talent, having a clear weak point that you can target as an opponent is something that could potentially hurt them in a best-of-5 series. And it's not like they're going to have a lot of practice in best-ofs making adjustments because we're now in a best-of-1 split. So I think that unfortunately could play against a guy like Solo, who I think just needs a little bit more seasoning. But you brought up he just needs to not die. If you look at his performance in the summer split in the challenger scene, he averaged about 2.54 deaths per game, which is slightly above what you would expect for an average top laner, but nowhere near as bad as Seraph was. So certainly there is a great argument to be had that this is a guy who will make fewer mistakes. And I think that when you look at the mid laners, well, I liked Niski and what he ended up doing. I think Fobiven's better equipped to capitalize on those opportunities. And I think that Hakuo is real good. I think Hakuo is maybe my favorite support in North America to watch, if only because Biofrost, who I think is as good, broke my heart the last time I saw him have an amazing series.
You mean when he single-handedly knocked Immortals out of the...
Yeah, that one. That one where I was like, I was literally...
twisting the knife.
I was there live, as Pelka can attest, and I was with my cousin, and I remember distinctly looking over to her and being like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. Like, this really sucks for us, but also that's incredible.
Yeah,
it was that mix of disbelief and sadness.
Against you guys.
It wasn't ideal, but Hakuo is ideal. If I were to make a list of what I want in a support, Hakuo does all the things that I want. Certainly
Honestly,
the best in-lane
no one's talking about it, but the support talent in A, this split's actually pretty great. When you look at it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a talking point you're seeing. People are talking about other lanes. But you have Bio, you have Afro, you have Adrian, you have Ole, you have Mithy. There's a decent collection of supports in here.
Yeah, I think all but two of them I feel very good about. It's gonna be a fun team to watch. I hope that they live up to their potential. Certainly they have a coaching staff behind the scenes that I think is going to be helping there as well. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly they can adapt and make the most of things. We're going to move on to the next
to
team.
see where you guys have them ranked. Super curious.
We'll find out later on in the pod. We've got some more teams to talk about. So let's get into those. Next up is Counter Logic Gaming. Unfortunately, their brilliant move to name their academy team Otto and Phil in the bot lane, we can't talk about today, but we can talk about Rainover coming in from Team Liquid, being the replacement for Omar God, who's going back for more seasoning, which I think anyone who watched Omar God play can say is
Thank
the
God.
right call. Yeah. Look,
Not a god. Omar Mortal.
He did the best in a situation he never should have been thrown into. I hope that he does better with some more seasoning. I also hope that Biofrost is going to be as fun to watch on this team as I think he's going to. Biofrost in 6A seems like a very great bot lane. Biofrost, of course, coming from TSM, the aforementioned breaker of my hopes and dreams. So I want to start with you here, Pelka. How do you think these changes help CLG heading into this split? Or do you think they help CLG, ultimately?
I'm a fan of what they did. Going out and getting other players is not what CLG is known for, but they pretty much got the best that you could possibly hope for in the situation. Biofrost is just a casualty of TSM wanting to bring in Mithy, and so that's a great pickup. Things with Afremu apparently were just not going to work out long term, so getting Biofrost is a great pickup, and Rainover especially is great. Darshan, the resurgent year last year, played really well at the last split, and Rainover is someone who is well versed in I need to get my top laner fed, and we're gonna play through there, and so that's where I see CLG going is leaning even more so on, all right, we're gonna play through Darshan, and we actually have the tools to do that, versus like 100 Thieves who wants to play through someday, but Meteos is not known for carrying other people
he carries
through his play. So I'm a big fan of what they've got going. Who he is still perpetually sort of underrated, despite being one of the better mid laners in North America last split. Stixay did not have a great split, but I think with the rejuvenated bot lane with the new support will work out great.
I agree with a lot of what you just said. I want to hear from Matt before I give my full input. Matt, what are you thinking?
I think Biofrost's great pickup. He somewhat encompasses a similar type of player that Afro tried to be. You know, those kind of like melee type engage supports. So that should be a pretty smooth transition for Stixay. And whenever you can get a player that's equally good or better, but a lot younger, it's always a good thing. Biofrost brings a lot of energy. I think Afro might have been just getting a little bit burnt out. The Rainover pickup is good, though I think he might... Part of what he always brought to Immortals was the fact he was kind of like that language bridge between the members of the roster. So when we had Rainover on other teams, he was a little bit hit or miss sometimes. So I'm not quite as high on Rainover being there as Pelkey is, though I do think it's... I mean, he's a solid pickup. Again, CLG has always been a team that even with this MSG money, he's operated within like self-imposed like financial restraints. I'm also not quite as rosy on Darshan. I guess I just keep expecting a split where Darshan is just going to fall apart. And I could see that coming any day. Like, if you told me at the end of this split that Darshan, like, just fell off the rails, I'd believe you. Told me Darshan carried CLG to a top 2 finish, I'd believe you. He's just still, to me, that type of player where he's at almost like a crossroads in career where I'm not quite sure where he's going. I'm slowly being won over on the Who train by all you people who just seem to love the guy with his ability to kind of... affect the game outside of his own lane, because his laning is not his strength. And I think on a team like this where you could potentially have a good top jungle duo and a good bot lane where Huhi's ability to just kind of make these cross-map plays with his unique champion pool like the Aurelion Souls of the world could result in a team that does better than I think some are going to peg them for.
Yeah, there are a lot of good pieces here. I think, you guys brought up Darshan. I think that ultimately the question is going to be, is this spring Darshan or summer Darshan from 2017? There was that streak of games that started with Darshan throwing away that Game 5 against FlyQuest in the 2016 summer playoffs and then pervaded through the next split. And then last split, he had the best KDA of all top laners in North America, most kills per game of all top laners in North America, without sacrificing a ton from kill percentage, second best in lane. He did a lot right, and I think that we're still adjusting to that swing back, but also that doesn't mean the 2017 spring went away, right? That, both of those things can be true. It can be true that maybe we're not giving Darshan enough credit, and I think the All-Pro votes didn't give him enough credit for what he did in the summer. I also understand the concerns, and I'm concerned about Rainover. I know that he's been a great player in the past. I think that his greatest asset has been his ability to speak both English and Korean, and therefore work as this in-game leader and translator on the Rift that adds utility, that allows you to bring in imports and trust that you can make that work. There are no Korean players on CLG. That's a role that is not needed, and so all we can judge Rainover for on this roster is his mechanical play, and I don't think he did a lot to impress on Team Liquid. Now, Liquid was a mess for a whole bunch of reasons.
There's a problem. Liquid just burns money, and so I tend to think of it as he was a victim of being on Team Liquid, like many others have been, more so than that. Like, that's his skill level to be assumed.
Yeah. And that's very possible. That, I think, is going to be the key deciding factor to me as to how far this team goes. We know who he's good. We know Stixay is real good, and pairing him with Biofrost is going to be a very fun bot lane to watch. It's going to be the consistency of Darshan and Rainover that is really going to decide how far that team can go. We're going to move on to the next roster. A roster that it is an established team, but it might as well have been a new team because it's an entirely new set of players. You've got Echo Fox here. Rick Fox's team, a team that people were wondering, are they going to get let in with franchising? The answer is yes. They're going to get Hooney from SK Telecom, making his way back over to North America after a up and down series of games in Korea, though, of course, on the Korean scale, right? People always talk about, oh man, Hooney struggled. It's like, yeah, on the second best team in the world. Like, we got to keep these things in comparison. But he's back in North America. Dardoch is on this roster from Team Liquid. Phoenix, the mid laner from Goldcoin United, previously on Team Liquid, is one of the LCS fans probably remember him last. OpTic, the AD carry from FlyQuest. Adrian coming in to support from Dignitas. And Eniro, the former Tainted Minds coach, a guy that people have loved behind the scenes for a while, getting his chance to coach a team in a main roster here. Matt, when you saw this roster come together, what were your thoughts? Where do you stand how this unit has been assembled?
So, can we get like a hard knock for these guys for like the season? Because this is going to be freaking great. You guys know what Hard Knocks is, right?
Yeah, Breaking Point 2.0. If they wanted to do it, I want to be in the Echo Fox house right now.
Once the official roster was out, I was... So, Froggen took the split off, right? Now, imagine we're talking about this roster, and it's Hooney, Dardoch, Froggen, OpTic, AD. I'd be hyped as hell right now. I'd be like, this is great. Instead, we get Hooney, Dardoch, Phoenix, OpTic, Adrian, and I feel like I'm getting this roster is really hard to judge because I could be awesome, even though I think Phoenix is a weak link. Dardoch could blow up in people's faces, but that Dardoch Hooney combo I think is gonna cause some like really crazy, like just top lane like double tower deep dives. They're just gonna be awesome to watch. This is the team I was most torn on because part of me wanted to put them like third and part of me wanted to put them like ninth. I couldn't put them 10th for reasons I'll explain later. So I guess potentially strong bot lane. OpTic Adrian's a pairing that I think people wanted a lot. Hooney Dardoch makes it's a really aggressive pair. So if they hit it off well, that's going to be fantastic. If they don't hit it off, it's going to be an utter disaster. So the entire story of this team is it's either going to be an utter disaster or it's going to be awesome. So it depends on what you're leaning towards. Do you lean towards utter disaster or awesome?
Where do you lean, Pelka?
I lean sort of in the middle ground in that I think that like the amount of talent on the roster is explosive enough that like I fully believe I fully believe this team could get perfect game someone during the course of the split, like easily. That could end up happening.
Like back to back.
I think they're actually they might be better off with Phoenix than if they had held on to Froggen, because that's just one more like really stubborn personality to deal with. And I'd feel sad for Quiet Boy OpTic trying to deal with all of that. Adrian too. I get the sense that OpTic and Adrian work well because they're both very low-key background individuals, and they just let other people sort of do a lot of the personality for a team. So, I mean, I don't like Phoenix. Like, I've never liked Phoenix very much.
He's not good.
He's, like, aggressively mediocre for the most part. He's got a champion or two. That's fine. That's great. But I'm not overall fan. But I think the roster will work better with him. This is definitely a roster that's designed around Hooney and Dardoch are going to carry every game, and hopefully Hooney has lost some of his English while he's been in Korea, so that he doesn't have to he can just let more of what Dardoch is yelling bounce off of him as time goes on. I was actually really disappointed. I remember seeing like the Dardoch announcement include Dardoch was talking about the perspective changes he's had, and it struck me as he got the wrong things that were taken away from. He was like, "Oh, I need to bend over for my teammates more," and it's like, no, that's also not what you need. Like, I want him to be, I'm the best, I'm going to carry. You just have to realize that like not everyone is like by most accounts just like a prodigious talent, a prodigious I'm told that it's not just mechanical skill. Like, he is an excellent thinker of the game, but he can't get over the fact that other people don't see the things that he sees, and he needs to have that change of perspective, and then things will be great. But he took the wrong things from his previous experiences. But so I see the Echo Fox roster flailing for the most part. I don't see it working fantastic, but
You're right. It can only fail so bad because Hooney's going to be able to carry some games on this.
Yeah, like they'll fall into wins. They won't mean to. Like they'll counterpick themselves and then just be like, "Oh, I don't know, I killed him. All right, cool."
This feels like this feels like a team that's going to do really well in the first 4 weeks, and everyone's going to be super hype, and then suddenly things are going to turn, and people are, other teams will figure themselves out, and the individual carry performances won't matter so much. I have a couple problems with this roster the way it's assembled. Number one, Phoenix wasn't good enough to play in the Challenger Series last split. Like, remember, he was benched for Fly, who they felt the need to import to try to get themselves to the next level, because despite having the best KDA in North American Challenger, Gold Coin United didn't have a lot of faith in him. That I consider to be his concern. I also, people talk about Dardoch from his skill set a lot, and I understand where that comes from. I will also say, having rooted for him for a whole split as an Immortals fan, and seeing how CLG played out, he's just not the same player game in and game out. If his first game goes well, he is a very different player than if it doesn't. He doesn't seem to have that, like you said, the takeaway should not have been, hey, I need to be doing more for my teammates to make them happy. It should be, hey, if things go wrong in the early game, I can still recover and be okay as long as I adjust with my teammates and let them help me out when they need to, instead of tunnel visioning in and then trying way too hard to make the next 2 or 3 plays because you feel the need to make up for it. And honestly, my biggest concern isn't even with him. It's with the manager who had an interview recently when he said, when it came to Dardoch's attitude issues that have been cited on team after team, hey, winning fixes everything. First of all, no, it doesn't. Second of all, he was winning on CLG a lot, and it didn't fix everything. And 3, no, it doesn't. So I can't.
That's a euphemism. That's in every sport they say that crap.
Yeah, but I don't like. If I'm supposed to believe that this is an Echo Fox team that will be better managed than the last 2 years we've seen, a team that is going to have prepared their players to an extent to actually get to the playoffs, to be a consistent power, to maintain game in, game out, some level of tangible consistency. I want to understand that I want to hear that the organization understands what the difficulties they're going to face are going to be. I don't want to hear the platitudes of like, oh yeah, we'll win and it'll be fine. That hasn't been the case for you guys. And in previous situations, that's not how it worked out with him. So give me something else. Tell me that you had a conversation with him about how his mentality changed in a way that you understand. Or tell me that you have a Nero who understands exactly what that type of player is like, and they feel like they're better equipped to handle him than any other thing. There are a lot of things that you could say. The winning fixes everything argument, to me, is a sign that Echo Fox built this roster with the idea of throw as much talent on it as we can fit and see what works. And historically, those do not do very well at the LCS stage. With the super teams like that, quote unquote, let's remember Alliance back in Europe back in the day, right? Like they're not
even the best super team that was put together this year, like from scratch. So
yeah.
There's going to be a game where Dodoc's going to get super pissed at Phoenix, and then it's just going to be a shit show from there.
Yeah, that sounds about right. There's going to be at least one. And look, for the record, Echo Fox fans who are listening, I'd love to be wrong. I want to be on the record. I would love to be wrong and have Dardoch prove that he's taken a mental step forward. You know, he is young. Young people grow up. I would love to see that. And I would love to see this team live up to the potential that's there on paper. I can just only base my prediction ultimately on what we've seen, and what we've seen is a lot of these guys have had issues with teammates on previous rosters. We didn't even talk about Adrian, right, who got kicked off of Phoenix 1 in the middle of the spring split inexplicably because he couldn't get along with Arrow when they were winning, by the way.
Pelka threw me off when he said that Adrian was mellow and just kind of went with the pack, because I'm pretty sure there's like multiple like short LCS clips where they interview the players where Adrian literally goes full doublelift and just says everyone else is trash.
His mellowness is sometimes maybe too mellow, I think, for people. Some people know what I'm saying there. We're gonna move on. FlyQuest, my new favorite team, because...
I'm excited for Immortals Reborn.
Yes, all hail our Lord and Savior Flame. May he reach the horizon forever. He is coming over from Immortals. So is Onda, who was a backup jungler, young guy who's going to be making his premiere on the LCS stage. Stunt joins as well, a guy that I really liked in what he did with Phoenix 1 in the Spring Split, and I think has done well in limited stints on the LCS stage in the past. Now he's getting that full-time starting job. They're also pairing him with Fly, the Gold Coin United mid laner previously on KT Rolster, i.e. that guy who can't lane at all but afterwards is pretty good. And then Wild Turtle, who I think speaks for himself, is the only part that's returning back here. And head coach Robert Yip, the strategic coach for Immortals. That Immortal staff, a lot of people drew on that when they could this offseason, which I think was a very good play. So as a fellow Immortals fan here, Pelkey, you're in the jersey now, which I greatly appreciate. I had to wear the red shirt because I get crap every year. You know, you're the RedShirtKing, but you never wear a red shirt. So I had to get that done. But you're rocking the Immortals gear. How do you feel about this FlyQuest roster?
I feel the FlyQuest roster is going to surprise a lot of casual fans going in. Anda and Stunt are not very well-known names, and Fly isn't particularly either. But they're going to do great, I'm pretty sure. Anda and Stunt are both talents that, by every account I've heard, in and outside of the Immortals organization, could have and should have been LCS starters last year. And it just, you were, like, Anda was stuck behind Xmithy, and there's not much you can do. Xmithy might be the best jungler in North America, or at least the best one to build a team around, given his shot calling ability. And Stunt is also, like, a fantastic player. I think this roster is going to do really well. Fly is probably the biggest question mark for me. I feel like a lot of people would look at Wild Turtle that way, but you know what you're getting with Wild Turtle at this point, which is over-aggression. That's always going to be the case. But when Wild Turtle is on, he's upper half. He's in the upper echelon of North American AD carries. He's still really talented. He's just perhaps plays like he's more talented than he is sometimes. But he's he's a workable player. He's far from the worst player that a team is like kept on a roster. So I'm really excited for Immortals, what they're gonna do. Or FlyQuest.
Yeah,
Immortals.
Look, man, it's okay.
Immortals Reborn.
It makes me feel better. You know, I'm still definitely in the denial stage of this whole franchising side of things. So I get you wholeheartedly there on that slip up. Matt, are you feeling the FlyQuest love?
Okay, well, for starters, this roster is like strictly worse than last year's. And it sounded to me like Pelkey was arguing that this roster might be better than last year's. I personally see them have kept it. Granted, I'm not an Immortals fan, so I don't have quite the understanding of Anda as someone who's more familiar with the organization might, or more familiar with the challenger scene might. And I certainly get the points about Wild Turtle. If there's anything Wild Turtle's been throughout his career, is he's like prodigious at putting out damage. Like he does do all that stupid stuff, but when you look at his damage numbers every single split, if you get him to the team fight and he doesn't do something stupid, he is going to out damage every other player in the team fight. He's very good at that. That's his thing.
Long as the team fight doesn't start with him, you're great.
Right, because he deals a ton of damage, and that's always been Wild Turtle's thing. He just has to survive. Right, exactly. As long as he's not flashing in for like some Varus ultimate, hoping he can pick someone off, he's fine. I guess I just feel like you guys are being a little roast because you got the 3 Immortals players on there, and Stunted Anda could be good, but the thing is, if Stunted Anda aren't the player you've kind of advertised them to be, or people in the org think, this roster could very easily be quite bad. Right? The worst case scenario for this roster is not great. There's no sure thing. Like, if I were to look at this roster, like, is there a sure thing top 10 player in the league on this roster? I don't think there is.
I mean, Flame was arguably the best top laner in the league in the summer split, but yeah, sure. Other than that,
yeah, but you have to look at the talent that's in the league now, because you've added people like PoE. I don't think the talent is there on this roster when we look at some of the other rosters you already looked at. And maybe Robert Yip can make something out of it that I'm just not expecting. I'm certainly not going to discount that, because, again, we're kind of beyond the point where it's just sheer talent is all that matters.
I do want to throw it out there. I am aware that while Robert Yip is the head coach, Rapid Star is actually the strategic coach that's going to be working for them.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another great guy to have. One of these days, like, we've really got to have a conversation about what coaching staffs are like nowadays and how much we want to give credit to different things, because there are a lot of different schools of thought out there, and I find the whole conversation fascinating. I like this FlyQuest team. I wrote an article about them that I'm going to put in the description of this video. I put in the a lot of puns, the flying high, because of course I did. I like the young players a lot. I think Anda has hit high challenger everywhere he's been. When they did the Korean boot camp, he was one of the first players of all the guys over there to hit challenger. Individually talented, clearly, when you look across the numbers and in a range, wide enough range of things. But most importantly to me, this is a team built with a purpose. All of these players are guys who are willing to make aggressive moves in the mid to late game. They're going to be willing to take those fights, to pick those champions off. Stunt is very much wired that way when you look at the champions that he's been mostly practicing on. Anda very much loves the hard carry kind of junglers when you look at his solo queue stuff. Wild Turtle, obviously we know that. We've seen Flame play a lot of those guys in the past. He's a lane bully at his heart. So you're going to see FlyQuest is going to be bringing the fight to a lot of people. And early on in the split, there's a risk there, right? Because Anda and Stunt are not as experienced, and Fly certainly seems like he's still not quite up to what we would want ideally from an NA mid at this time. When you look at the rest of his competition, I think he's going to struggle, especially in lane. But I think this is a team with a lot higher upside than the rosters that I would put under them. I think that if Anda and Stunt, as these young guys, grow over the course of the split, and I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't, especially with the coaching staff that FlyQuest has on display, this is a team that's going to be getting better and better as the season goes on. So I go back and forth in my head a lot over whether they're going to get to that point quickly enough to make the playoffs. But I think regardless of what they ultimately do in spring, I think this is going to be a team that people should be watching out for in the summer split. This team is going to take steps forward with these young guys, and I think they're going to be very scary when the summer split rolls around, if nothing else. But we're gonna move on to a team that I have this is probably the team I have the hardest time getting excited for. This is the Golden Guardians, the Golden State Warriors team. A lot of guys on this roster, obviously, that we, it's a whole new team, so they're all coming from different places. Lorlo from Team Liquid coming in the top lane. Contracts, this is where he ended up from Cloud9. He's probably the guy that people are going to be most excited to watch, kind of see if he can continue that growth that he had in 2017. High in the mid lane, guaranteed shot caller there. Insert best shot caller NA memes as you'd like here. Deftly from E United, a guy that I think deserves to be on the LCS stage, and I'm glad he's getting that shot. And Matt from Team Liquid, coached by Breaking Point star Loco Doco, a guy who, there's a lot there that we'll have to kind of figure out exactly where he is as a coach compared to some of the other guys that we see across the board at this time. Pelka, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this Golden Guardians roster? Is this team better than the average Redditor is giving them credit for?
I mostly just feel sorry for Contracts when I look at this roster. He is a talented player with potential, and he's just not on a good roster. Deftly is fine, I guess, and there might be some interesting things going on with High. High was, to my understanding, at least in part responsible for Moon looking better than he has in a while. So there could be some interesting things going on there for Contracts. He might learn some pathing and decision making from High, but that's about all. I'm like, it's not a good roster. Matt is just continually looked worse and worse since his first split. Lorlo is just he's another guy that's just aggressively mediocre.
Year of Lorlo, boys.
So I don't see like how they win. I don't see what the like. All right, we're gonna play through High, I guess. Like I don't know what their plan is with this roster. I don't get it. They're bad. It's gonna be bad.
Yeah. How do you feel, Matt? Do you get it? Tell us what we're missing.
There's a lot of with most of these rosters here. You could like jump through a few like mental hoops and like find some argument to make where they could be decent. And I ran out of hoops, man. I ran out of hoops to jump through. I can't get there. That said, I think they're gonna win some games. Just like the argument you guys just made with FlyQuest, I could definitely see Golden Guardian just kind of coming out there and early on in the season and High just doing some of his High bullshit and them snagging a win or two from some other teams. Actually, I'm curious to see who they play in the first week.
Their first week schedule, because we just asked, they play Clutch Gaming, and then they play Cloud9.
That's a little rough.
Yeah, that's not great. If you're
not great if you're trying to get off to a quick start.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess I'm on board with what Pelkey said, where it's just the talent isn't there like at all. I don't know, man. I just have this feeling just like I don't want to bet against High, man. I don't know. I feel like he'll find a way to make this not the worst team in the split in the league. That's about as best I can say for it. Is I think High will find a way to make it so they won't be 10th.
And honestly, if you want evidence for that, you point to FlyQuest in 2017, which was a roster that none of us were very excited about heading into the spring split.
He is carried equal, if not worse. He's found a way to make. He has shined some man. Okay, he has shined them pretty good. So maybe, I mean, Contracts might be the best player he's had to work with in a while, really.
Yeah,
absolutely, actually.
Yeah. So he might be able to just get some, clever stuff. And if I'm trying to jump through those hoops to find a story where they're not awful, I guess Matt and Deathly could be good enough to just be average and not be so bad where they just lose games before High can even do any of his stuff. And maybe Lorelo is maybe we're using the wrong Mayan calendar and this year's the year of Lorelo. Maybe. The Rapture they predicted 4 times. They just keep pushing it back, saying, "Oh, we had the wrong calendar." Maybe just every few years they're gonna be like, "Oh, we just had the wrong calendar. This is the year of Orlo."
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't think they're gonna be the worst team in the league. Actually, it's just something in my head just says, you know what? I don't think they're gonna be the worst team in the league.
I will say this. I think High deserves credit for what he does, which is shot calling on the Rift, understanding of the game. I don't think anyone doubts his knowledge or his ability to kind of teach people step by step. We hear, High certainly seems to have helped Moon. Guys like Xmithy have done really well with helping players like Cody Sun. There's value there intrinsically. And if High can teach Deathly and Matt how they need to play out that landing phase and shore up some of the kind of weaknesses that both of them have had over their careers, that would go a long way, and that would be valuable enough in and of itself. I really don't like Locodoco as a head coach, man. That's the part that he on a week-to-week basis in the LCS. If my goal is, hey, let's build up some young guys and Deathly, and Contracts is still only in his second year. Matt is still a guy who certainly he needs mental. He needs some help getting back up after years of being beat down now on that Liquid roster where he was kind of used as a punching bag for a lot of different problems. Loco's not the guy I want in charge of that. That's not the guy that fills me with confidence to maneuver all of those difficult social situations and everything.
The one thing I'll say in Locodoco's favor, and we can transition from there, is he's been a head coach, which is not something you can say for a certain French coach we'll get to shortly.
Yeah, let's get right into it. OpTic Gaming is our
Who is
team.
He was a caster for the French League.
Yep.
He was a French caster.
And he, by the way, is Zabutine, for those of you who don't have all of these sheets in front of you.
That sounds like a weird French food that I wouldn't want to eat.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the thing I would jump to on the menu.
It's most of the sounds of poutine, which I think is what you're going for.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll see whether they can live up to the glory of poutine. We've got a roster here, mix mash of a lot of different teams. You got Zig from Phoenix One in the top lane, Acadian, your jungler from Echo Fox, Power of Evil, your mid laner from Misfits. That's the big one. The traitor, as all of the internet was quick to say. How dare he go to a roster that's going to make him a whole bunch of money and shore up his career for the long run. Arrow for Phoenix One, Lemon Nation from FlyQuest, and that Zabutine is a coach who's never done any coaching or even analyst work for a team, right? It's all been casting, if I understand correctly. Pelkey,
it could be Freak.
Yeah, okay. That's not... I'm not sure that makes me feel better. That's not... oh, man, well, thank goodness they at least...
At least I know Freak could do the math.
Could you imagine Freak being the head coach for, the Green Wall? That would be... Oh, my God. I think I'd want to, shoot the base.
Look, man, they've already got Romaine for any memes and puns that they need, and I think they're going to be good to go on that front. But let's start with you here, Matt. How do you feel about this roster? Where do you come down on it?
Okay, so this was one of those, this OpTic was one of those 4 teams I mentioned earlier where I feel like they have, these 2 players. I'm just all right, this is a great starting place to build from, and then 2 players that are okay, this is not great. And then in their case, there's Lemonation where I'm just how is he still on a team? It's the cruelest joke imaginable that you get Arrow there with Lemon Nation. Like, I feel like I'm watching like an episode of like Big Brother. Like, they're just stuck in the house together, and it's Arrow and Elimination. But honestly, I think this team can only be so bad because I think Power of Evil is really good. Though I'm sure like all the EU fanboys are going to suddenly like retroactively change the narrative of what they think of him and call him bad now because he's not in North America. I think Power of Evil and Arrow are good. Acadian, Zig and Elimination are bad, and that's. I don't know if I could get too much deeper than it's 2 good players and 3 bad players, and I don't know, man. I don't know. This entire team just is. You would think like the biggest, like OpTic Gaming outside league, like outside MOBAs, like what, like the biggest esport organization in the world, almost, right? Like they're really big in FPS games, right?
Yeah, probably the biggest that were just not in MOBAs until now. Yeah,
right. I guess I feel like they should have been able to get a better roster. It's like I feel like it's like the Major League Baseball team that goes on lands that big free agent and then forgets that you need some guy to like, you know, cover for your like 35-year-old outfielder when he needs to go DH.
Yeah, where do you stand on Pelka?
So, Lemonation almost makes sense. He almost makes sense with OpTic. Now, what doesn't make sense is he's playing for OpTic.
Right.
But if they were like, Lemonation, do you want to be our coach? And then Lemonation's our coach, I'd be like, that's terrific. That's why we wanted him for years. That's all you want him for, is his Pickman notebook and going through that. And so, like, that would make sense. Like you were saying, like, Arrow is a fine I'm a little lower on Arrow, I think, than you are, because while he can be terrific in team fights, he's abysmal at laning for the most part. And when I think, who do I need to carry my 80 carry out of the lane phase, it's not Lemonation and his 1 pick a month. Like, that isn't going to work out well for them. Power of Evil's great. He's fine. I don't think he can do much with this roster. Acadian is fine. He's, I think, better than he's maybe given credit for. He had a great start, and then sort of tapered off. But I think he's overall, like, pretty fine. If he's your 3rd or 4th best player, I think you're in an all right place. And I guess he sort of is, like, in that position with this roster, but...
Yeah, but first is here, and then second's way down here, and then, like...
yeah. Arrow is not a terrific... Like, I don't like him as your 2nd best player, and I don't like Lemonation on a roster, which is a big problem. I think they're going to be the worst team in the league, probably. I've heard not good things out of the scrim environment that teams have going on right now. I believe OpTic was one of those teams that Jack might have been mentioning with his academy team, and their performance, which is like, you don't want to be in a place where someone's bragging about how their 2nd team is doing against your team. It's I don't see it. It's a bunch of players that have been hyped, and I don't think they at all have lived up to the hype since then. Zig was supposed to be like a great hope for North America top laners, and he's been pretty average. And Acadians, like, it's a team full of meh and Lemonation, and which balances out the fact that Power Evil is awesome. He's been great, but you can't be great in a vacuum in League of Legends anymore.
There must have been a lot of zeros on his paycheck.
Oh, I'm sure that he's happy with his decision, no matter how that's going.
Yes.
He's set for quite a while.
Many zeros after that initial not zero.
He's, Power of Evil, I love the guy. I've obviously, there's a reason I picked Misfits second heading into the, summer split, and why we loved watching that team at Worlds, right? That was a fun team to watch. But people forget that during the regular season there and throughout all of the spring split, he's a very inconsistent player. He he always wants to make the big play, and whenever he gets a little bit of a lead, he feels like he totally can make that next big play, which can backfire on him. So, like, if he's going to be your number one player, usually you would want like a jungler like a Maxlore who can keep him safe and is there for the defensive stuff to help minimize the damage. Or you would want a support like an Ignar who's making those plays as well and setting him up so that he can keep snowballing off of those moments. This team has neither of those things. You brought up Acadian. I had an argument with someone about this yesterday, actually. So I have all of the numbers in front of me. If you... God, it just moved away from me. If you look at his stats from the summer split, here's what you get. You get the 2.4 KDA, which was the 10th best in North America. You get a 64% kill participation, which was the 11th best among junglers in North America. Dead last of junglers that played 10 or more games, which, KDA, I understand, like, bad teams don't have great KDA. Kill participation, that's inexcusable. 9th in damage per minute, which we think of him as a guy who likes to play carry junglers, wasn't doing a lot of damage. 9th in earned gold per minute. We think of him as a guy that does a lot of early ganks that should boost those numbers up. That didn't happen. So, other than his gold differential at 10 minutes, which was the second best of all junglers, numbers do not back up the idea that he is going to have this, upswing now on a different roster. I think that, like a lot of junglers, you come in early, people haven't figured out your pathing yet, you're new, you can get away with some things, there's film of you, people analyze it, they know who you are now, and the next time that they play you, they have an answer to it. I think people have figured out how to answer Acadian, and he's going to have to take a big step forward, I think, as far as coming up with strategies and being able to match his opponent point for point. Maybe Lemonation helps that happen. Maybe Zebatine is better than we think. There's just not a lot of evidence on this roster of like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be great to train up Acadian, or this is going to be the situation that gets Zig to where people have been telling us he's going to be for a while, or this is what's going to make Arrow suddenly not a bad laner. It's a lot of question marks for me, and I understand Romain saying like, hey, it's too early, give us some time to sort things out. I think the answer to that is, hey, our academy team actually looks pretty good. We've got a lot of raw young guys that we're probably going to rotate in and out of the split because I don't think they're going to do very well in the spring. So I think that more than maybe some other teams, they might be willing to throw some guys in and out, try some stuff, and then figure out in the summer what 5 guys they ultimately want on that main squad. It's just my instinct. I don't have any inside information on that. That to me makes more sense than OpTic wanting to stick with the roster that they currently have fielded from start to finish over the course of 2018. But we're going to move on. There are 2 teams that people have been waiting for this whole time, and it just so happens that alphabetically we were able to wait until this point to get to them. The first one here is going to be paid by Team Liquid. Team Liquid, of course, roster that's been here for a long time in the NA LCS. Didn't do very well last split. Obviously, all of those memes were coming in, and it was a team that's like, they clearly went in the offseason. They're like, we need to use our Disney money and make sure that what happened in 2017 never happens again. And oh boy, did they make a splash in this offseason. You get Impact from Cloud9 in the top lane, the former world champion there. Smithy, Pobelter, and Ale from Immortals, arguably the 3 best members of that team. And then you get Double Lift from TSM, the best North American AD carry historically that we've ever had. Certainly a guy who has a lot of carry potential with him. This roster seems stacked to me as far as talent goes. And of course, they're still going to be under Kane, who is a guy that gets a lot of respect behind the scenes as a coach. I think people don't attribute the issues of Team Liquid last split to his coaching so much as other behind, other things that really impacted that team. So, Pelka, when you look at this roster, does it deserve the hype that it's getting? Is it as good as it's being advertised right now to the average fan?
I don't think so. I think they're going to be good. I think relatively they're going to fall on their face, and that they're going to end up not making the finals, because I'm worried. I'm mostly worried about Pobelter. He's talked about he wanted to step up and be more of a leader last split for Immortals, and he was not very good in the playoffs, and I don't have as much faith in Doublelift as I used to either. He's still a dominant laner, but his positioning faults and his deaths are just it's worrisome to me. I'm interested to see what happens with him and Ole, because despite his roaming sort of reputation, from what I understand, Ole loves to just scrap it up in the bot lane. So it could work out fine for Team Liquid, because Impact, Doublelift, and Ole just dumpster people in the laning phase all the time, and then Xmithy just has to all right, Pobelter, you're fine, and Pobelter's like, I don't do anything anyway. And so it could work out, but the team does not feel to me like it has that X factor that other teams have. It doesn't feel for whatever reason, it just doesn't feel particularly well constructed.
The liquid part. It just because it has liquid before the
Yeah, I just have that feeling there's something's going to screw up here, and I think it's going to be Pobelter or Doublelift one of them is going to end up being the problem, so to speak. It's really a quandary for any team trying to make a roster that Pobelter is basically the only North American mid laner worth hiring. But he's had one playoff series where he really stepped it up when CLG first won against TSM, and besides that, he's really not ever been the player that people want him to be. And I don't see things going as well for Team Liquid as they're gonna hope.
Interesting. Matt, what about you?
So, all right. So this team is going to get top 4. So I think how they do in the playoffs can only be so bad because they're going to get a bye. I think the talent of the roster pretty much gives them a floor. This is something that often happens in fantasy. People try to get cute, right? They're like, oh, but if this player does this thing, then this team might be better. Why don't you just draft the fucking player who's already that good, instead of picking the player that you hope is going to be that good? And I feel like we're being cute here with these rosters. We're like, well, if things work out with this player, this team is going to be pretty good. If things work out with this player, this team is going to be pretty good. This team is already going to be pretty fucking good. It is. You from a talent perspective, they are loaded. I definitely understand the points about Pobelter, but he could just kind of throw an Orianna ball out there and press off. That's pretty much all he kind of needs to do in a team fight. I think Xmithy is going to solve a lot of ills on this team, because I think most people would agree by now that he's probably if not the best junker per se, because there's always that best versus most valuable type of argument that exists in Forts. He's definitely the most valuable junker in North America. That said, if I'm looking at the ceiling for this roster, and I want to compare them to, say, last year's TSM, is this team actually better than, can I see this team being the best North American representative to ever go to Worlds, for example, right? And I guess I don't see it, because the point you make with Pobelter is right. So Pobelter, Bjergsen, obviously you're picking Bjergsen. Well, TSM didn't want Doublelift, so but even if it's a wash because both teams had Doublelift. Ole, I mean Ole is good, so I guess we could call that a push. I don't know. I guess I'm with Pelk on the fact that you just get that singing feeling because this is a Liquid roster that somehow they're gonna fuck it up.
Yeah, and honestly, that's earned. Like that, like we can say what we want about like, oh yeah, like there's the memes that come along with that, but to take a step back and realize that we have the same coach and the same managing staff of a team that spent more money than anyone else in 2017 and finished in last place or ninth place.
And they've always done. I guess this is a good test case of whether certain organizations are just always cursed. Like the Browns always find a way to lose. The Bills always find some creative way to lose. You know, the Cubs found 100 creative ways to lose for 108 years. You know, it's just one of those situations where there's just something in the organization that's just so off that doesn't matter. Because keep in mind, this is an organization that has been fucking up new acquiring talent for years. X Special had his tiff with TSM. At the time was probably top 2 at his position in North America still. He got gifted to Team Liquid for like peanuts and, well, probably Liquid money, but you know. And Liquid wasted the last like year and a half of his prime, I would say. Like this organization just consistently fucks up talent somehow. Yeah, well, it's just weird, you know.
I mean, can we not say somehow? Because I think we know how. I think
not somehow. We know how.
Yeah, we have an owner in Steve Aronset who says things about his mid laner like we've tried everything and nothing seems to work. Right? Like this, we have behind the scenes footage that has been put in front of us of people not seeming to know when to step in when personal issues arise, and oftentimes making it worse. If you're going to believe that Team Liquid can win the championship, I think on the Rift, there's no argument this team is very good. I happen to think they're very, very good because I think the world of Xmithy. I do think he's the most valuable jungler in North America. I think that's going to do a lot as far as minimizing problems. I'm actually more worried about Impact, I think, than Belter.
Didn't Double F Next Smithy have a thing back in the day?
I honestly don't remember. But if I can continue my point, I like Impact in general, but last split it really felt like he wasn't being able to take the fights that he needed to. He was struggling a little bit. His teleports were just a little off. There were rumors that he was potentially going to retire at the end of the split, and those didn't go away over the course of the year, and he is up there in his career. So like there are a lot of little things where it's like Liquid needs to prove that they have taken a step back and examined how they got to where they did at their lowest in 2017, and will improve things from that coaching and management perspective. Because there is no such thing as a team that does everything perfect every day. There are going to be ins and outs of day-to-day life that will need to get sorted. There will be scrims that don't go very well that they will have to be able to react to appropriately. A lot of veterans on this roster, a lot of guys that we should imagine will keep their cool and stay focused. But you need to create an environment in which you can get the most out of these guys if they're going to win the title. And that's really the conversation that Team Liquid's going to have with a roster like this. They should be in the finals competing for that title with the talent that is on display. The question is whether they're going to get in their own way on things that have nothing to do with purely on the Rift performance. And I hope, I'm going to give, maybe not all benefit of the doubt, I'm going to maintain my skepticism, but I'm going to be optimistic with that skepticism and say that last year the problems were as pronounced as they could have possibly been, to the extent that they should have been able to learn from it as an organization. I hope Kane has learned from it. I hope that Aronset and the managers and all the other analysts and everything that are behind the scenes and that we don't say their names as much, I hope all of them have taken a step back and learned the lessons that they're going to need if they're going to contend for that title. Because as good as this team is, there's one other roster we haven't gotten to yet that looks real good as well, and happens to be 6-time NA LCS champions and 3-time defending champs with that. That would be the boys in blue, Team SoloMid. They're still real good. Hanser and Bjergsen stay from last split. Mike Young comes in from Phoenix 1 as the jungler for them. Sven and Mithy coming over from G2, the big off-season splash. The European guys that have a great knowledge for the game and are very, very strong together in lane. And, of course, Song, the Immortals coach of the split in the 2017 Summer Split, and a guy that I think could do wonders for this TSM roster in terms of keeping things fresh in a way that maybe things had gotten a little bit stale. I want to close with Matt because he is the TSM guy. So let's start with you, Pelka. How do you feel about this team? Are they as good as we believe they're going to be?
Yes. Mike Young is the only sort of question mark. Need to see how he develops. I don't have much information about like his work ethic or anything like that. But he seems like he'll do fine. The addition of Mithy to take over shot calling responsibilities is going to be great. Like I can see Bjergsen coming back with just an outrageous individual year. Hanser, I think, is going to be a big beneficiary of all that's going on because Song is a great coach to learn from, and Hanser is actually like a really analytical player from what I understand. Like talking to people who've worked with TSM, like the thing about Hanser is he excels through just I should be doing this right now, so I'm not going to do something else. And he, I think, is overrated to some degree, just because like people into him way too often. He just puts himself in a position where he doesn't make a ton of mistakes, and people will make them just feed themselves to him because of it, and he takes advantage of those. It's fine to just be like, if you're a top laner, just I'm going to take advantage when people screw up, and that's all I need to do. I'm just going to be hanging out top. I'm just going to be a Maokai. I'm just going to root people when they decide to turret dive me, and it's going to be great. So like TSM is gonna wreck people by every imaginable way.
I tend to agree with you. I think that this is a very scary team. Mithy as a shot caller, I think, is going to be massive. Not just because he brings a very fresh, nuanced perspective that has won 4 European championships in a row, but also because for a guy like Mike Young, who would you have? Like that's the dream scenario, right? Mike Young gets to learn how to read the early game and mid to late game shot calling decisions from Mithy. That's as ideal a situation as you're going to get. This bot lane is going to win lane quite often. Really good at that. Bjergsen is Bjergsen, so you're going to imagine that the early game here can go very, very well. And as you said, Hanser doesn't make mistakes. Mike Young can throw some attention his way, and suddenly they have a very likely possibility of having 3 winning lanes on a pretty regular basis. I would not be surprised to see that kind of early game dominance. And if I look at what I wanted to see from TSM at Worlds, having more of an ability to focus in on that skill that they have in the early game rather than playing back like, oh, we'll outscale, it'll be fine, and leaving that kind of room for error. Like, this is a team I think can take the attack to people and pick them apart and really make a statement week in and week out. I think this team is scary. TSM, it's one of those things where it's like, people get bored of seeing the same champs year after year, but, hail to the king. And right now, they still look like the kings to me, as far as I can tell. Matt, this is your team. This is your moment. How are you feeling, man?
So, with a roster like this, I feel like you immediately have to set your expectations should be, which is as always with TSM, top 2 should be a guarantee. When I look at this roster, I want to look at what it's going to be. TSM state goal of winning Worlds. And I think it's interesting because you're probably combining the actual 2 best players on G2 versus what people actually think are the 2 best players on G2. with like the best player in North America, which is Bjergsen. One of the top 2 or 3 top laners, and then honestly, jungler can be relatively plug and play with TSM. I'm mostly excited like Pelkey is for Mithy because I think he'll bring a level of creativity to TSM shot calling that they just never have. Like, they're a very predictable team. They pretty much do the exact same thing in all situations, and you just know it. And they get by with sheer mechanical skill and talent, and the fact that Bjergsen, it just always seems to know like the right thing to do in a team fight. Like, he just does these small little things. Like, I love watching the team fight breakdowns that they do, and you'll see a breakdown of a TSM fight, and it's just like milliseconds of decision making that Bjergsen does that just completely swing the team fight in TSM's favor. I definitely like the idea of having a coach that was actually signed to be a coach for TSM because they dabbled in that whole let's get a traditional sports coach thing. I think Parth became coach more of necessity than like really like, all right, this is going to be the guy. So whereas now I'm really hoping this is one of those situations where Reginald like hands the keys to the kingdom to Song and lets him do his thing, as opposed to being that influence that steps in every now and then. I really do think there's a potential for this team to just have some games that are just like over at 19 minutes. Like, they're just going to be like so stupidly blowing away some of these rosters that it's not even funny. Now, and I've had some conversations with Chase about this type of thing. My main concern with the roster, as far as where I want them to be, and there's something that Pelka touched upon, is they're potentially expecting a really great individual year from Bjergsen. And so I'm wondering, or I'm concerned whether that player still exists. We all remember Season 4 Spring Split, where Bjergsen would literally just utterly, because Scarl is still considered a good mid laner in North America then, okay? He would just come in and like style on people like LeBlanc 14-1, like stuff that literally just never happens in esports anymore. Like, you don't see that in League of Legends anymore. Does that player still exist? Because he spent so many years like becoming this player that kind of sacrifices for the team and takes fewer resources and makes these cross-map plays, and I don't know if he can go back to the player we want him to be. So it's almost like we have this great player in Mithy who's potentially going to take that shot calling burden off of Bjergsen and unlock him. As everyone's been saying for years, that Bjergsen needs someone to unlock him so he can be the player that we all expect him to be. I'm afraid that player might not exist. He might not be able to go back to be just that like sole lane dominant force. So maybe for me, I still think they're just going to wipe the floor. I think I predicted last time I talked to Chase about this is they're going to 18-0 the split. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to carry that forward to this conversation. I'm calling a 18-0 right now on record for it. I guess long-term for Worlds, I guess I'm just wondering whether Bjergsen can be that player that you need, that stopper. Like, if you're familiar with baseball, when you're on a losing streak, you need that like pitcher that's just going to come in and throw shutout and just break that streak right now. And you need a player that has that killer instinct that knows that like, this is my moment where I'm going to take over the game. And like, that was the thing that you always saw with Faker, whereas there's you could almost see it flick where he's just like, all right, carry mode. I'm done being the team player. I'm going to do something silly with Rise and appear somewhere, like teleport my entire team blind, somehow figure out exactly where the enemy team is, just land there and one-shot everyone. You need that killer instinct. Like, it's like LeBron in the finals of last year's NBA Finals, where in the last game, he's like, we're losing. So in the last fourth quarter, he just took it through himself. Sometimes your best player needs to stop playing nice. Sometimes he needs to be Kobe. He needs to go out there and just make the plays himself. And Bjergsen just hasn't been that player. He hasn't had the killer instinct. Doublelift has assumed that role for TSM. If you look at most of the major come-from-behind victories of TSM over the last year and a half, it was Doublelift who was turning on in a team fight. Like that famous Cloud9, was it Cloud9 team fight where it was like 2 versus 4, and Doublelift literally gets like a quadra kill? Like almost single-handedly. Like, Bjergsen hasn't filled that role in years, and he needs to be on this roster. for them to really meet the potential that we're looking for them to have.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a great point. I think that this team has proven that they can win on a regional level. I don't think anyone has any doubt about that. I think that they're going to be in that title game because they're always in that title game, and until proven otherwise, I think that's where they're going to be. They've got a lot of guys who know how to win and know how to compose themselves. There was a great article that Doublelift wrote for the Players Tribune recently that talked about how at Worlds there was just this attitude shift that happened. And there was this atmosphere over the team that everything felt weird and people got quiet and no one said anything. Someone's got to say something. If Bjergsen's not going to be that guy at this point in his career, maybe that's why you bring in a guy like Mithy, because maybe Mithy says something. I have a feeling that he would. So maybe that's where he can kind of step up a little bit. Maybe a guy like Mike Young, who's still young but seems to have this great passion for what he's doing. Maybe he's a guy that can be a locker room guy in those kinds of moments that help bring people together. There are a lot of, I think that how they handle that is going to be the difference between being great and being great internationally. And I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see all these teams come to fruition. But now's the time to put our credibility on the line and make our predictions for the split. The way we're going to do this, just a real quick rundown. Go from 10 to 1, your worst to your best team, with like a sentence or two as to why that is the case. And then I have tallied up all of our scores combined to give you the official rough drafts ranking. But let's start with you, James, just because you're sequentially to my right. We'll go clockwise that way on this whole Discord thing. What you got?
So at 10, I'm going with that OpTic roster. I don't awful. And then number 9, Guardians. Just pull some games, basically. And then sort of 100 Thieves and Echo Fox. I sort of think of them in sort of the same sort of tier of, they have some interesting things maybe going on, but they're not going to be like a real playoff team. C9 and CLG make playoffs, but like don't do much there. 4 FlyQuest and 3 Team Liquid. And then we're pulling in with Clutch at number 2, TSM number 1.
Yeah, that Clutch number 2 is the one that stood out to me.
I'm real big on that roster. It's real. It looks real great.
I like it. You're making me want to change my rankings, but I've already locked them in. So I'm gonna instead send this over to Matt. Matt, where did you put things?
Okay, so I have FlyQuest 10th. I just think that roster is just bad. I'm a TSM fan. I've seen plenty of Wild Turtle. I've seen it. I'm done with it. 9th, I have Golden Guardians. Same place with Pelka. Same thing. They'll steal a game here or there. I will find a way to steal a game or two, but that's about it. 8th, I had OpTic. Same type of thing. I think I just have a little more faith in Power Evil than you guys do, but still, 8th is still not making the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter. 7th, I have 100 Thieves. I guess I just kept coming back to the fact that I just feel like they're in that awkward state where they're not quite good enough to make that top 6, but they really can't be too bad because someday is still pretty good at League of Legends. At 6, I have Clutch Gaming. I wasn't quite as sold on the players, the sporting cast, but I'm not as familiar with Hakuho. I don't think I watched a single game that he played in last year unless they were playing TSM, and I probably didn't pay attention. Gonna be honest with you, it was Envy. Envy was not a good team. I had Echo Fox 5th. And that's mostly because I just feel like there's enough talent on the roster, and who needs good enough player. Dark, OpTic, Aiden, good enough players. They just seem like I can't see a world where they don't make the playoffs, but it's that 5-6 spot where I don't think they're going to do anything. You're going to notice on my rankings that I put a lot of value in these veteran organizations with players we know who have done well. So I have Cloud9 4. I definitely agree that they might take a slight step back, at least temporarily, with this switch to Svenskeren, and it could take Licorice a little bit of time to get used to NA LCS. But Jensen, Sneaky, and Smoothie have been here before, and I guess I really value that, especially as these new organizations kind of get their feet wet. I have CLG third, which is probably a little bit different for you guys reporting them. I'm a little more optimistic, surprisingly, even to myself, because I was even like thinking about this. I can't believe I put them third, but it's another organization where Zix is a good coach. They're relatively stable from a playing standpoint. I can definitely see them early on, especially building this like insurmountable lead in the standings where other teams might end up better than them. By the time it gets to the end of the season, though, it's only 18 games. We don't have many games because of the change to 18 best of ones. So I just feel like they're going to end up at a point where other teams might be better, but standing-wise, they're still going to be third. Second, I have Liquid. I guess I just... I've decided to have a positive outlook at the team, apart from Donald Trump. And I really think that, with a roster with that much talent, it's really hard to fail. Like, it would take the mother of all fuck-ups for Liquid to actually mess this up. This is a phenomenal collection of talent. Doublelift has a chip on his shoulder. I could certainly see them crashing, burning, and like maybe the summer split for some weird reason, because this is a roster that's not going to get better over time. We know who all of these players are. They're all long-term players. This is not wait for the summer split because all these young players are going to get a whole lot better. That's not what that roster is. Then I already said TSM was going to go 18-0 because that roster is honestly ridiculous because it was the Reddit dream roster. Like, you literally would go on Reddit in September and in October, they'd be like, wouldn't it be cool if TSM got like Sven and Mithy and then they could pick up Mike Young? Right? It was literally the fanboy roster, like the wet dream roster. So yeah, TSM number one because you gotta, until the king gets dethroned, no team has shown in like a year and a half that they have what it takes to knock TSM off the perch. Because it gets to a certain point where you either have to like put up or shut up, and no team has been able to put up. TSM does year in and year out. So TSM number one.
Yeah, all of that seems fair. I mean, FlyQuest, but whatever. We'll move on. We'll accept that. Number 10, I had OpTic Gaming. I think that team is just not. I have no faith in Acadian. I have no faith in basically in any of those guys other than Power of Evil right now. I don't think it's a team that has an identity in mind, and I think it's going to be rough with a coach that's still going to be learning on the fly how to do his job. Golden Guardians at number 9 because High's going to figure out some way for them to not get 10th, and that's the nicest thing I can say about this roster. 8, I have Echo Fox. I think this roster is going to crash and burn. I do not know how these personalities are all going to mesh together. And even if they do, I don't know that they're consistent enough on a week in and week out basis that all 5 of these guys are going to be on point at the same time. That seems tough for me. I have a hard time talking myself into them. Number 7, I have FlyQuest. I think this FlyQuest team is going to be great in the summer split. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I think Fly certainly needs to get back up to LCS speed. I think that Onda and Stunt are inexperienced, and they might be played on a little bit early on for that. I think they're going to get better as it goes on. I love this team for the summer split. I think the 6 teams I had above them, I just felt some consistency was really there. CLG is number 6 for me. I like this team. I don't really like Rainover. I don't think that he's a great jungler outside of some of the intangibles that don't really matter for this roster. So I'm not as high on them as a lot of people. I have Clutch Gaming 5th, and I got to be honest, you're talking me into wanting to put them a little higher on my ranking, but I'd already written my stuff down. I love this team. I love all the envious guys. I think Hako is amazing. I think Lear is great. I think Forbidden's going to be a great feature on this team. Ultimately, I put him where I did because I think solo is a weak point. And in the playoffs, you can create a game plan that punishes that. and I think you could see them exiting in the early rounds for that reason. Number 4, I have Cloud9. Stability reigns in a split like this. I think that the core is still very much there, and that core is good. And I like Licorice quite a bit, even with Svenskeren being that question mark as to how things turn out. Where I deviate from both of you guys a lot, I'm in on 100 Thieves. I'm in. I'm putting them third. I like this team. I think Cody. Look, man, the Zach and Cody bot lane is going to be a lot of fun. I think that's one of my favorite names, if nothing else, for a bot lane. I think they're going to work well together. I think Aframu is a great guy to kind of teach Cody on the bot lane what he's missing, and I think Aframu, change of scenery guy. I think there's a lot of potential there for him. I think that someday is best day, and I think that Ryu being reunited with a coach that actually knows how to use him is going to go a long way. I am banking on a lot of things turning out correct. It requires a more optimistic view than I think you two brought to the team. And if any team's going to make me feel silly at the end of the season, it's going to be 100 Thieves. Either I'm going to feel amazing about that pick, or I'm going to feel very dumb and what the hell was I thinking? And we'll find out. Number 2, I have Team Liquid. It scares me to have them at number 2 because they are still Team Liquid. But there's so much talent on this roster. So much veteran talent on this roster too, which I think, as far as the floor goes, is always worth taking into consideration, because unlike maybe a team of young guys where some of the behind-the-scenes stuff can really weigh on them, these guys have all been on good teams, mixed teams. They've gone through issues with other players. They've been on all of these different experiences. So I think they're going to handle the ups and downs better than I think any of the other Team Liquid rosters that they have before. And that's assuming that there are those ups and downs. This team could just be super talented and not really have to worry about it in the spring. And that means all hail to the king, TSM. I have him number 1. This is a really, really, really good roster. And I love what Song and Mythy are going to bring to this team. I think you're just going to take a TSM team that was already really great in 2017 and take them to that next step. So that means our final Rough Drafts official rankings, when you aggregate all of our scores, go as follows. Number 10 is OpTic. They got 28 points, and it's the golf rules, so you want as low as possible. Golden Guardians right next to them at 27. Number 8 was FlyQuest at 21. Matt really driving that average down there. 100 Thieves at 6. That's on me, bringing them up with my ranking. Cloud9 at 5th with 14 points. That's kind of exactly in the middle of where we all had them. CLG at 4th. Again, right about the middle where we all had them. Clutch all the way up to 3rd, thanks to James's ranking there, which I like kind of how that turned out. Number 2, Team Liquid. And number 1, hail to the Kings. We've all picked them. It seems like the obvious pick. It's the boring pick. But statistically, it is also the most likely pick. And that's where we think this split's going to end up. Where do you guys at home think this split's going to end up? We have that lovely comment section here for a reason. We love hearing from you guys and keeping the conversation going. And, of course, we also have the Rough Drafts Discord, where I watch games regularly live with fans of the pod. And keep, talk. You can ask me questions directly during the season. A lot of great guys in that chat. So you are all more than welcome to join on that link in the description if you want to keep the conversation going there. Of course, you can find all of us on social media. I'm at RedShirtKing, and I am, of course, full-time at Unicorn, where you can see articles that I'm doing over there on unicorn.com. Pelka, where can the nice people at home find you?
Find me on Twitter.com at PelkaSupaFresh.
Perfect. And then Matt, where can the nice people at home find you?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter, where if I'm not talking about Trump or SM, I'm probably dead. SuperbianMG.
Yeah, that's fair. I would be very nervous to not see your Twitter account active, to be honest with you. But that's it for this pod. We are going to be doing a roundtable for the European LCS as well. I'm not sure the order in which that's coming out. It might be already there. If it's not, it's coming out the next day. It just depends on which one I get done editing first. very exciting stuff for both of these regions. It's going to be a very fun year of League of Legends. I'm going to be doing vlogs before every week of games, real quick, kind of rough cut videos, giving you guys an idea of where I think you guys should be placing your bets. That's going to kind of be the new version of the Guess the Lines podcast, because that's going to be a little bit easier with what my workload is going to be looking like now that I'm in the job that I'm at. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you guys are looking forward to a ton of awesome content and a very fun League of Legends season. So until next time, goodbye, Internet.